We begin this episode by acknowledging the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we record and share these stories. We pay our deepest respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening or watching today's episode. We honour those who walked before us, their enduring connection to country, and the stories held in land, sky, and spirit. May we listen with openness and learn with humility. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Beyond the Veil Australia podcast, where history, mystery, and the unexplained collide. From eerie encounters to forgotten histories, from channeled messages to scientific perspectives, we explore phenomena that defy easy explanation. I'm Heather, your guide through the shadows and the host of Beyond the Veil Australia podcast. Together, we'll unravel paranormal events, curious connections, and the questions that refuse to stay quiet. So whether you're a skeptic, a seeker, or somewhere in between, this space is for you. Welcome. Last season, we lifted the veil, but this time, we stepped through. So, the passage is open. What waits beyond is now calling your name. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Veil Australia podcast. For those that are new here, my name's Heather. I'm your host and obviously the voice behind Beyond the Veil Australia. But welcome back to the post-investigation episode of Beechworth Asylum. This one, it was a little bit easier to put together, but again, it takes a lot of time with these investigation episodes because it's just so much that you have to sift through and, funnel down into what you're actually going to talk about. So this one has probably got lots of smaller experiences that have occurred since the ending of the investigation. Now, if you've listened to the investigation episode, I do apologise. It's a very long episode, but for everybody as the listeners and viewers' sakes, I really wanted to keep everything in the investigation in one big episode rather than splitting it over multiple. Number one, because I feel like you get to be fully immersed in the whole investigation in one go, but also it is a lot of work to split them up and, it's can sometimes be more annoying splitting them up. And I really wanted to keep it as pre-investigation, the investigation, and post-investigation episode. So welcome back. If you're joining me now, I have just obviously completed the investigation episode. So I'm coming back now to get the post-investigation episode ready and out to you. Again, I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody that listens or watches across the audio platforms and YouTube. It really truly means a lot, and I am so thankful for everybody that's been on this journey. I do really appreciate everybody's patience as well between a lot of these episodes coming out, because they're a lot of work, but life has been very, very full on for me over the last month and a bit. Between obviously the pregnancy, I didn't mention it in the investigation episode, and mainly because I was just trying to keep it just I didn't want to ramble on and then make the investigation episode any longer than it already was. But basically, a couple of weeks ago, we did get finally, I should say, we got an outcome for my 7-year-old with a dual diagnosis of autism and ADHD, which has, sadly, it's been a very long process, because it's something that we've been trying to raise since he was about 3, and we were consistently ignored and told that there was nothing going on. And, a lot of our experience with parenting has been, it's felt a lot harder than it should be at the best of times. And to now have a dual diagnosis, it just validates so much of, us going, okay, well, yeah, we're neurodivergent, and it can be hard for neurodivergent parents. If they're neurodivergent, they can get quite overwhelmed. But when you've also got that neurodivergence in your child as well, it can be really difficult to navigate that area of life. So, the journey with that has just been very validating, but it's also been really hard to just take in between. Obviously, I'm in my 3rd trimester now with my 3rd baby, so there's been a lot with appointments that have started kind of coming up a bit more frequently in that respect. My 4-year-old has been really, really difficult in other ways, which, looking at similarities between him and his brother, we are also fairly convinced that he is neurodivergent as well, but it's obviously difficult at his age group to be able to undertake assessments because of, the developmental things that kids go through at different ages. So we're just trying to navigate what his needs are as well in all of this. So, that's been really difficult to try and, work through. Not to mention the next area of all of that, which is navigating support options and what that looks like, and applications and all of that stuff. And for those that are listening abroad, we have here what's called the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is basically like funding for support if you have disability, and autism is classed as like a long-term disability. Unfortunately, ADHD isn't. And I remember saying to the psychologist that we had the diagnosis through, I remember saying to her, so what happens with support options for us? Because my son obviously can't choose when he's going to be more autistic or more ADHD. And she did reassure me and say, look, regardless of whether it's a dual diagnosis or not, you're still supported for everything. It's just that it's going to be more focused on the area that they can technically provide support. So, that in itself, in Australia, there's been a lot going on with the NDIS, and it's a very tricky world to navigate, and it can feel very daunting and overwhelming. So amongst trying to get all my episodes prepped and ready to go, and dealing with all of that at the same time, and being pregnant, and obviously with work, I did mention in the last one, we're pretty short-staffed. We're basically down to half our capacity, and I've got more upcoming appointments, which is putting a little bit more extra pressure on me, because I'm trying to make sure that I'm covering what I can at work, and obviously maintaining my health. So there's just been a lot that's happened in a big space of time, which has really significantly delayed me being able to get these recorded, because the days where I normally do my recording have been filled with appointments for myself and my children and everything in between. So it's just been a bit of a fucking massive whirlwind. A whirlwind's probably an understatement. A fucking tornado would probably be more appropriate, because there's just been so much, and it's a lot to process. But on the upside, Bubs is still going well. I did have a midwife appointment yesterday, actually, which weirdly enough, which sort of fits in quite well with this episode, but yesterday I had my appointment was scheduled for 1 p.m. and I was kind of like, cool, I've dropped the kids off at school and kinder. I'll come back and I'll start recording my episodes. And I shit you not, my computer would not cooperate at all. I had to restart it several times. It was not connected. It kept telling me that the internet connection wasn't working, and then it was, and then it wasn't. It was just like, what the actual fuck? So I took that as a sign of, okay, maybe they, even though it's been a long enough wait as it is, maybe they're like, nope, not today. And what's weird about that is that I think I'd started prepping everything at 9 a.m. and it was probably about 9:40 that I was like, okay, I've tried restarting it several times. I've tried doing this. I've tried doing that, blah, 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 blah. It just didn't want to cooperate. So I went, fuck you. I'm just leaving it. It is what it is. We'll just work out another day. And sure enough, I'm doing this at nighttime the next night. But what was interesting was probably about an hour, probably less than an hour after that, I actually got a phone call from the midwifery clinic to say that I was scheduled to see the obstetrician at the clinic, which I thought I was only seeing the midwives, but whatever. And they're like, oh, unfortunately, we're short staffed with doctors today, so we're having to reshuffle stuff around. Like, can you come in earlier or come in later? And I said, well, look, I've still got to do school pickup in the afternoon. It would probably be easier to come in earlier. And so I ended up being able to go in basically an hour and a half earlier than my originally scheduled appointment. So for me, it was kind of like, okay, maybe that was the reason why I was being kind of blocked from doing the recording, because I needed to have time to record and not feel pressured in recording times and things like that. So maybe that was why the computer went, not today, sorry, the other things are happening. And so, yeah, interestingly, that happened yesterday. So I didn't think about it at the time, but it wasn't until sort of a bit later in the day that I went, oh, I wonder if that maybe was the reason for it. And I sort of looked at coincidences a lot lately, and over the last probably 12 months, I've started to learn that coincidences are not technically a thing. They're messages, basically. And, a lot of things that I've experienced where I'm like, oh, what a coincidence. You just naturally roll it off the tongue, knowing full well that it's not just any old coincidence. It's happened for a reason, and you can generally find out and see why. So, yeah, that was quite interesting yesterday. So it's not through lack of trying sometimes. It's definitely been hard to find the right days and the right times to work around different things. And because of how content heavy these investigation episodes have been, they do require so much time to prep and to get sorted and to get recorded, let alone edited in the process too. So, yeah. We're finally here, so that's something, and I'm really, really excited about that. So hopefully, yeah, we can keep on moving and pick up where we were and be able to sort of manage it a little bit easier from here on out. And I just want to say a massive thank you for everybody's patience and for your understanding. I've had a few people reach out recently as well after my recent post, and I just truly appreciate everybody's care and love to check in and make sure that I'm doing okay and things like that. I'm doing well. It's just there's just a lot going on that the energy, like physically for me now that I'm in the later stages of pregnancy, it's just a lot harder to manage things, and you do get tired a lot easier too. So even now, with tonight, I'm obviously recording the investigation and the post-investigation episode on the same night. It's a good chunk of time that you've got to set aside for it at night when no one else is running around and interrupting. So, I do definitely feel tired, but I feel excited at the same time because we're finally here and we're finally able to get this out there for everybody. And just a huge, huge shout out to you all. And I truly appreciate your support, and thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. And yeah, I hope that you've been able to check out the episodes that Sam from Aussie Afterlife has put out there with some of the EVPs that she's captured. I believe she's currently got 2 episodes out, and at the time of recording, I think she's working on her 3rd one. So again, make sure you go and check out Aussie Afterlife podcast as well for her experiences and EVPs that she caught at Beechworth Asylum. Also, if you haven't already, I would highly encourage you to go and check out Date Night with the Ghost Gang on YouTube. They have got episodes 1 and 2 out of the actual investigation, which obviously goes a little bit broader and shows a lot in what we experienced and the evidence that was captured. So I would highly recommend going and checking them out. Again, give them a like and a follow. Same with Aussie Afterlife. Make sure you get on and support them as well, because they are amazing investigators and content creators, and it's been an absolute pleasure to obviously work with them from my standpoint of being able to do interviews with them all, but to be able to then go out and do an investigation with them all has just been truly amazing for me, and I'm very thankful for that. So yeah, if you can, make sure you head over and check them out. Again, they're both platforms they're on as well. I think they're both on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and Aussie Afterlife podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube as well. So make sure you go and check them out and give them a like, give them a follow, give them a subscribe, because they're amazing. So here we go. Let's get into our own post-investigation episode. So again, thank you for joining me, and let's get started. Some investigations end when you walk out of the building. Beechworth didn't. What happened inside the asylum stayed with us long after the cameras were off, long after the equipment was packed away, and long after we drove back to the motel in the early hours of the morning. This episode isn't about the evidence we captured. It's about the aftermath. The physical crash, the emotional unravelling, the psychic fallout, the things we didn't talk about until days, weeks, and even months later. The things we didn't even understand until we were out of the building and we were still feeling it. Because the truth is, Beechworth didn't let go when we left. It followed us back. It followed us into our dreams. It followed us into the days, weeks, and months that came after. And for the first time in a long time, we had to face the reality that some places don't just haunt the living, they mark you. This is the story of what happened after the investigation. The part that no one sees, the part that no one prepares you for, the part that changed us. Welcome to Beyond the Ward post-investigation episode of Beechworth Asylum. The return to the motel. When Sam and I finally got back to our motel room, sometime after 3 a.m, we were beyond exhausted. Not just tired, but drained, hollowed out. The kind of exhaustion that sits in your bones and makes your thoughts feel really heavy. I told Sam that I was going to jump in the shower to cleanse after the investigation, also hoping that the hot water might ease the headache and the nausea that had been hammering me for hours. But the moment we walked through the door, I didn't even make it to the shower. I was already rushing to the bathroom to vomit. Again. I steadied myself, rinsed my mouth, and turned on the shower. From the other side of the door, I heard Sam say she was just going to get into her pajamas and was heading to straight into bed. I stepped under the water, letting it run over my head. And even though I'd washed my hair that very morning, I washed it again. Every part of me needed cleansing. I wanted the energy of the asylum off my skin, out of my hair, and out of my system. The heat, it helped a little. The pressure of the water, the rhythm of the shampooing, but the nausea, it just kept sweeping through me in waves, and the headache sat behind my eyes like a pulse. Eventually I got out, pulled on my pajamas, made a cup of tea, and took some pain relief. And then I crawled into bed. Sam and I lay there debriefing in that half-awake, half-delirious way that you do when your body is done, but your mind is still trying to make sense of everything. We talked about how severely affected we'd been, something that was so unusual for both of us. We talked about the evidence we'd captured, the things we'd seen and heard in real time, the EVPs we'd reviewed on the spot. And we talked about the things that we might have caught, the moments that slipped past us in the chaos of the night. But the exhaustion was catching up fast. We both started drifting, mid-sentence, mid-thought, mid-analysis. We knew we had to be up and ready for checkout at 10 a.m. And we knew we had a long drive home ahead of us. So we let ourselves fall asleep, not knowing that the night wasn't done with us. And not knowing that Beechworth hadn't let go. Not knowing the real unravelling, the emotional truth of everything, was still to come. Before we move into the morning after, I want to share something with you. When Sam and I woke up a few hours later, we were still trying to make sense of what had happened. We were exhausted, foggy, and carrying the physical and emotional weight of the night before. In that moment, before the drive home, before the debriefs, before we understood the full impact, I recorded a video. It wasn't planned, it wasn't polished, it was just honest. A snapshot of how we were feeling in the immediate aftermath without giving anything away. A way to capture the truth of that morning before we had the language to explain it. So here is that clip.
Good morning. I am so fucking tired. It's not funny. What an interesting investigation we had at Beechworth last night at the asylum. Still feeling some after effects of some of the experiences that we had. Yeah, really kind of creepy and fun, but yeah, I can't wait to share everything with you all. It will take a while to share it all because there's a lot that needs to happen in the between, but yeah, it was such a crazy experience, and I'm really glad that the sun's out today because I can sort of come out and do some grounding afterwards. But yeah, it was full on, lots to share, and yeah, I hope you stay tuned for that one.
What did we all think of that one? That was me, the morning after, still trying to make sense of what happened and realising that the night hadn't let go of me yet. Just 5 hours after we'd collapsed into bed, I woke up. Streams of sunlight were slipping through the gaps in the curtains. I could hear birds outside, bright, cheerful, completely at odds with how my body felt. The exhaustion was still there, heavy and dull, but something had shifted. When I opened my eyes, I realised that the headache was mostly gone. The nausea too. My eyes still ached, but at least it felt like I could function after the tiny amount of sleep we'd managed. I flicked the kettle on to make a coffee and quietly slipped into the bathroom while Sam was still asleep. I didn't want to wake her. We still had time before checkout, and we both needed every minute of rest we could get. Once my coffee was ready, I grabbed my sunnies and my phone and headed outside to the little garden area. The sun was warm, the air was crisp, and the sounds of nature felt grounding after everything we'd been through. I sat there for a while, breathing, sipping my coffee, and letting my body settle. And that's when I decided to record that video you just heard. I wanted to capture how raw it felt in that moment, before the day took over, before I had the time to intellectualize anything. I stayed outside for about 20 minutes before heading back to the room. When I walked in, Sam was awake but still lying in bed. We greeted each other, and you could hear the exhaustion in both our voices. Not just tiredness, but that deep, bone-level depletion that comes after something intense. We started reflecting on the investigation, slowly piecing together the night before. I showed Sam my notebook, the one with all my channels written down, and watching her face light up in shock was incredible. Some of the names, impressions, and experiences I'd written were things she had felt too, but at different points, on the drive in, at the hotel during dinner, and of course, in the asylum. We were excited, validated, and also shocked, but honestly, relieved. Because even though our experiences were different, the similarities were undeniable. It made both of us feel like we hadn't been carrying these moments alone. I made Sam a coffee, and of course, I needed a top up myself, and we sat there drinking our morning brews, debriefing again, while we packed up our things and prepared to hit the road. It felt like the beginning of the end of the night, but we had no idea that the real unravelling was still ahead of us. The grounding. Once Sam and I had finished packing our things and loading our cars, we both knew we couldn't just leave. Not yet. And not like that. We needed to ground properly and to make sure nothing from that night could follow us home. We walked out to the beautiful garden area that the motel had and headed toward a row of about 5 trees, standing in an open patch of grass. It felt right, safe, neutral, a place where the earth felt steady beneath us. We each had our cleansing sprays, shoes off, bare feet on the cool morning grass, eyes closed, and we began. I asked my spirit guides for protection, for safe passage home for both of us. Then I spoke clearly and firmly to any energies that might have attached themselves during the investigation. You are not permitted to follow us. You are not permitted to attach to us, our belongings, or our vehicles. You stay here in Beechworth. As I said this, Sam suddenly spoke. I can see the most beautiful pink and green colours, like smoke in my mind. I'm taking this as a good sign. I laughed softly. Well, your podcast vibe is green and mine is pink, so I definitely believe it. Sam giggled, genuinely surprised. Oh my God, you're right. And now they're mixing into this beautiful peach colour. I think the grounding is working for both of us. In that moment, I felt a quiet confirmation from my main guide, Auntie, a warm, subtle knowing that we were protected. We thanked the spirits of Beechworth for connecting with us, for sharing their stories, and then, politely but firmly, told them that they needed to stay behind. I also knew, quietly, that the grounding near the trees would give any lingering spirits a new place to anchor themselves. The roots, the branches, a safe place for them to settle without needing to follow us. As we closed the grounding, we sprayed ourselves from head to toe with our cleansing sprays, including the soles of our feet. Then we walked back across the grass, both of us feeling strangely lighter, fresher, more ourselves. When we reached our cars, we sprayed the inside and the outside of them too, making absolutely sure nothing was coming with us. We said our goodbyes, promising to check in via voice messages on the drive home. It was a tough farewell. We'd been through so much together in such a short time, and we knew it. And we knew that it would be a while before we would catch up again in person. As we left the motel, we each went our separate ways. I made a quick stop in town to take a few photos of the old Beechworth jail. I was driving right past it, and who knew how long it would be before I returned to Beechworth again. After that, I continued into the township, grabbed a coffee and some food for the road, and began the long drive home. The drive home. Once I finally pulled out of Beechworth and onto the open road, the world felt strangely still. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and the music playing through my speakers felt almost too normal for what my body was carrying. I kept replaying the night in my mind, not in full scenes, but just flashes, sensations. The weight of it still sitting somewhere behind my ribs. The ache behind my eyes was still there too, although it wasn't as sharp anymore. It was just a dull, persistent throb. A reminder that something had happened, and something that my body hadn't forgotten. As I drove, I noticed my GPS quietly recalculating and redirecting me onto a completely different route home. At first I brushed it off. Maybe it was quicker for the time of day. Maybe the traffic was building up somewhere. But something about it felt intentional. I sent Sam a voice message telling her my GPS had taken me a different way and that The further I got from Beechworth, the more the ache behind my eyes eased. She replied almost instantly. Her GPS was doing the same thing. 2 different cars, 2 different systems, on 2 different routes, both diverting us away from Beechworth in ways neither of us had actually expected. As we drove, we kept sending voice messages back and forth, little check-ins, little moments of synchronicity. At one point, Sam mentioned she kept seeing the colour purple in her mind's eye. And right as I listened to her message, I looked up to my left and saw rolling hills blanketed in a sea of purple flowers cascading down the slopes like a living tapestry. I told her what I was seeing, and she'd replied with, "Yeah, I saw that too." It felt like our drives were being choreographed and guided, each of us being moved along our own path safely, gently, and deliberately. Then, without warning, my GPS told me to exit the freeway. Suddenly I was being diverted through the Yarra Ranges, a place I would never willingly choose to drive through, because the roads there are narrow, winding, full of sharp twists and steep drops. The kind of roads that make my anxiety spike and my concentration scatter. But the day was perfect, clear, sunny, and warm. The kind of weather that felt like a small mercy. As I wound through those back roads, something unexpected happened. The ache behind my eyes began to fade even faster. Not slowly, very noticeably, deliberately. And I knew, without needing to ask, this was my spirit team at work. Taking me the most confusing, winding, disorientating way home, so that anything that could have possibly still be lingering from Beechworth would lose its bearings and fall away. The drive was stressful, yes, but with every turn, every bend, every patch of sunlight flickering through the trees, I felt lighter, clearer, and more myself. By the time I'd reached my local roads, that heaviness had lifted completely, and I felt calm, happy, grounded in a way that I hadn't expected. Then something happened that caught me completely off guard. As I turned down the railway road near my home, I felt the presence of the local spirits, the positive ones, greeting me, welcoming me back. It was gentle, warm, and familiar. A soft, "You're home now," that settled into my chest like a sigh. And I didn't realise how connected I was to my area until that moment. How safe it felt. When I pulled into my driveway, I sprayed myself again with my cleansing spray. Then the car, then my belongings. I re-established my boundaries before stepping inside. Firm, clear, intentional. I set up my crystals straight away, washed all my clothes, and sprayed anything that couldn't be washed. Only then did I let myself breathe. Home, finally. Safe. And ready to rest after everything Beechworth had taken out of me. In the weeks following, the days, weeks, and even months after the investigation showed us something we weren't prepared for. Beechworth hadn't let go of us, and neither had the connection between Sam and me. In the first week alone, something strange had happened. Something that neither of us could have predicted. But before I explain that, we need to rewind to the day of the investigation. While Sam and I were getting ready in our motel room before actually heading out for dinner, we made a throwaway joke. One of those silly, offhanded comments you laugh about in the moment and then just forget about. It wasn't serious. It wasn't even paranormal related. It was something we never expected to manifest in any way. It was just a moment, a true moment between friends. Fast forward to the week after the investigation. I had an experience. Something deeply personal, unexpected, and honestly life-changing. I was still trying to process it, still trying to make sense of what it meant, and still sitting in that strange space between shock and quiet acceptance. And then, out of nowhere, Sam messaged me. Her voice was shaky and unsure, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard from her before. She told me she'd had her own experience, something she didn't know who to talk to about, and something she felt safe enough to share with me. As I listened, my whole body went cold, because what she'd described was very similar, if not the same, to what I had experienced. And the wildest part, it was directly connected to that throwaway joke we'd made in that motel room before the investigation. Something neither of us had even taken seriously. Something that we'd actually laughed off without a second thought. I had to sit with it for a moment because my heart was racing, my mind was spinning, before I could even respond. Within about 10 minutes, I sent her a message confirming what had happened to me. And suddenly, we were both sitting there in two different towns, staring at our phones in absolute disbelief. Shocked, confused, a little overwhelmed, but also relieved. Because whatever this was, whatever had unfolded for each of us, we weren't in it alone. We spent the next few days talking on and off, supporting each other, grounding each other, trying to make sense of something that didn't neatly fit into logic or language. It was confronting, yes, but it was also strangely comforting. If Sam and I hadn't already felt like twins in our friendship, this experience actually sealed it. It deepened our connection in a way that neither of us actually expected. It united us in something so personal, so intimate, so beyond coincidence that it felt like the universe had stitched our paths together with invisible thread. And we may never share the details of this publicly, and that's okay. Some experiences aren't meant for the world. Some are meant for only the people who live them. But what I can say is this. In the weeks following Beechworth, something happened that changed both of us. Something that reminded us that the spiritual world doesn't always stay neatly inside the walls of the investigation. Sometimes it follows you, and sometimes it opens you. Sometimes it connects you to someone in a way you can't explain. And for us, this one was one of the most personal, confronting, and strangely beautiful experiences we've ever shared. So, again, Sam and I have had some really strange experiences that, again, it comes back to that whole thing of like a coincidence isn't a coincidence. You know, this particular throwaway joke, you know, I say throwaway joke, it's just the way that I've phrased that. But what was actually said was something that for both of us, we were kind of like, oh, that ain't happening for us, or that, you know what I mean? Like, it was really something that both of us were kind of like, yep, that's not on our 5-year plan, right? And so because of that, it just felt really strange that there was this connection that had happened within that week where we'd both learnt something about ourselves that was also very, very similar to what the other had experienced in the same week. And I think we were both in a state of trying to process that and felt like, you know what, this person's going to get me. And to then have something like that where it's like, holy fucking shit, let me have a hot minute to actually catch up because this is insane. How could something like this have occurred at the same time for both of us? So anyway, that again, it is a very deeply personal experience that we both had. And I think that, you know, it's nice to be able to give you guys the kind of like a bit of a story about it, but it's obviously not going to go super in depth because I think that some of those moments are deeply personal for both of us that, you know, out of respect for that, it's keeping the authenticity of our experiences to ourselves because not everybody needs to know the nature in which these experiences occurred. So it's it's kind of it's definitely something that it's like, you know, holy fuck, how could this happen? And really wanting to highlight that, but obviously, just being respectful of, both of our personal lives and things like that, and just how deeply personal it was for each of us. Yeah. So I hope that you're enjoying this so far. I know we've kind of like jumped through a few bits and pieces through this because it is quite sort of smaller chunks of information. But one thing I will touch on with the drive home was, going through all those windy roads and everything. I knew the minute I came off that freeway, I just was like, oh, you've got to be fucking shitting me. And I knew straight up, I didn't even have to question it. I knew my spirit team was like, no, something's still trying to have a go. Let's lose them, And when I say like that kind of story around, the types of roads, that doesn't even do it justice. Like these roads, a lot of them are like a single lane car width wide, and they're going up and around and down all at the same time. And you're in a car going, thank fuck that it's actually sunny and clear, because if it was raining, I would have pulled over by this point and had a fucking meltdown, because it was like literally being on a roller coaster on these roads. And for anybody that lives in that area, God, I don't know how you do it. My husband's family lives up that way, and the roads in certain part of their area are a bit like that, but they're not quite as intense as what I'd experienced on my way back from Beechworth. But yeah, no, don't like those roads at all. If they were like, double lane, or if they were like a proper road, I'd probably be like, okay. But yeah, when they're like all the back roads through the hills, and they're sharp, twisty turns that basically turn back on themselves, and then all of a sudden you've got cars up your ass, and you're just like, bro, just back off. I'm doing the speed limit. This road is gonna fucking kill me, so just piss off, It was very anxiety feeling that particular part of the drive. But what was interesting was, as I was moving through those winds and twists and turns and up and down those hills, I could actually physically feel that sensation in my eyes just dissipating away, like so obviously I could feel it releasing. It was really, really strange. And I think that's why I knew kind of almost immediately when I'd sort of turned off the freeway and was going back that way, I was like, okay, yeah, there's more at work here, and I just have to go along for the ride. I'm shitting myself at the same time because the roads are frightening, but I could feel the positive work that was, guiding me through that and looking after me and helping with that. So yeah, really, 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 really interesting. But yeah, there was a lot of things that, along that freeway part where both Sam and we both ended up going further along the freeway than we did on our way in. And like there was different things. So like, with certain parts we'd be like, oh yeah, I saw this and I'm in this area now and blah, 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 blah. And, we'd be chopping backwards and forwards being like, oh yeah, actually, you know what? I noticed that too when I was going through that area or whatever. It was really, really quite interesting, just the amount of similarities that we'd had even just on our way back. I know Sam had mentioned a few times that, the further away she was moving from Beechworth, the more she was starting to feel a little less vagued out. She's starting to feel like the concentration was starting to kind of come back a little bit and just starting to feel a bit more like herself. And I was the same. I really noticed that, through each part of that trip home, the further and further I got when I was paying attention to it, I could physically feel the difference. And it was amazing that, yeah, by the time I was in my own local area, I was like, oh, that whole headache tension is completely gone. The nausea, completely gone. Tiredness, still kind of there, but that's pretty normal. It was really quite interesting. So, yeah, there you go. But what I'm going to do right now is I really need to have a quick 5-minute break, and then we will continue on from there. Okay, sorry, I needed to have a quick a quick pit stop. Have a baby pushing on my bladder. So, just had to have a quick time out then. So I do apologize. But here we go. The biggest surprise ever. Several weeks after Beechworth, something else had happened. Something I never saw coming. And on that note of needing a break, I found out that I was expecting my third child. It was actually a complete surprise. This wasn't something that had been on my radar, not something I'd been planning for or even thinking about. But when I calculated the dates, I realised something that stopped me in my tracks. I would have been just pregnant at the time of this investigation. Barely aware, barely measurable, but undeniably there. And I've now got goosebumps again, so that's confirmation. And suddenly, so many pieces began to shift into place. I started wondering if the reason I'd been so heavily impacted by that night, the physical symptoms, the emotional intensity, the way the energy had just clung to me, wasn't just because Sam and I were naturally sensitive. Not just because we tend to amplify the emotions of victims and refuse to buy into the manipulations of perpetrators. But what if there was actually another layer? What if my guides already knew? What if they were protecting me long before I even understood what was happening inside my own body? The thought settled over me quietly, gently, not as an answer, but maybe as a possibility. Maybe the reason that night hit me so hard wasn't only about the spirits we encountered. Maybe it was also about shielding something new, something forming, something that needed protection in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. And honestly, it made sense. And what's really funny is I can feel that she is moving around just as I read that. She was like, boom, yep, that's right, Mum. Yeah, so interesting. She's moved off my bladder now, which is lovely. So the grounding, the detours on the drive home, the way my symptoms eased the further I got from Beechworth, the overwhelming exhaustion, the emotional intensity, and that strange sense of being guided, redirected, and held. It all felt different when I looked back with this new understanding. I'll never know for certain, and I don't need to, but the possibility that my guides were stepping in, not just for me, but for that tiny life I didn't yet know I was carrying, felt incredibly powerful. It added a whole new layer to the story, a layer of protection, a layer of purpose, and a layer of quiet, unseen care woven through the chaos of that night. And it made the entire experience, that shock, the intensity, and the aftermath, feel even more profound than it already was. And what I found really strange was, obviously the more I've been able to reflect on it, since learning I was pregnant, the more things I started to start piecing together. So there was obviously the 15-year-old that I had sensed in Grevillea. There was some young children in the bull pit that we could feel were coming to us as mother protectors, and that, as a parent, if a child, whether it's your own or someone else's, comes to you and needs your help or needs you to protect them from something, that natural instinct, that mama bear, that protective instinct kicks in. And because potentially these child spirits that were victims of some atrocities, they've come to us going, you can be my safe place. And because I didn't know that I was as vulnerable, I guess, as I was, because being pregnant obviously is a vulnerability, but it's that not because I didn't know that. It was like, maybe it's just, I'm a mum and I've got kids that are the same age as what we're sensing of these victims. And, Sam was similar in that sense too, that it's like we're picking up on children that needed that protection, and we weren't going to stand for the nastiness of these perpetrators. And, it's almost like part of it was we were being impacted to silence and to get us out because we weren't afraid, but also there would have been a limit where our guides, both mine and Sam's, would have been like, you guys need to remove yourselves now because there's actually more happening than either of you know at this point. So it is really interesting that, you know, the more I can reflect on certain elements, the more it sort of makes a bit more sense. Again, there's always going to be heaps of things that will come up and it will be like a little penny drop moment for me. But sometimes I can't always go back and go, oh, hang on, what was that thing? You know, like sometimes it is really hard to remember all of those little moments. So yeah, there you go. So there was something even more interesting that happened post-investigation as well that kind of ties in. The shared experiences. In the months that followed the investigation, the story of Beechworth didn't just end. If anything, it deepened. All of us, Sam, Mon, Anthony, Mel, and myself, we all stayed in touch as we began piecing together our individual content. We were comparing evidence, sharing psychic impressions, reviewing audio, and trying to make sense of the strange things that happened during that investigation. But what none of us expected was that the strange things weren't actually done with us yet. As we each started working on our episodes, something shifted. Something heavy, something resistant, and it showed up in our bodies first. A few weeks before releasing my first episode, my left eye suddenly just swelled up. It came out of nowhere. There was no injury, no infection, and not really an obvious cause. But in the days leading up to it, I'd been feeling that familiar pressure behind both eyes. The same pressure that I'd felt at Beechworth. The same ache that had followed me home. At first, I blamed work. Too many screens, the heat wave, pregnancy, but the pressure just didn't ease. Not with rest, not with pain relief, not with anything. Then the swelling hit. I went to the chemist who suspected a blocked oil gland. But when I explained it wasn't painful, it was just swollen, itchy, and paired with a sinus irritation, I was convinced it was an allergy. He wasn't so sure, so he told me to try warm compresses and to come back if nothing changed. Well, guess what? Nothing changed. So I went to the optometrist, a woman who, funnily enough, was also pregnant. She confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Allergy, cold compresses, pregnancy-safe antihistamines, rest. But what caught my attention was her mentioning something called migraine glasses, specialised lenses for people who are sensitive to certain types of light. Now, as someone who's had migraines since I was 3, I felt like the universe had just handed me a breadcrumb. I'd been using blue light glasses for years, and they had always helped, and now I understood why. But back to the eye. The swelling eventually went down, but the ache didn't. My eyes were still sensitive to light, still strained, and still making it impossible to work on my content, even with dark mode, even with filters, and even with breaks. I pushed through anyway, and then something happened that made everything click. The night that I had actually recorded my pre-investigation episode, I joined a TikTok live with Tim from We're Haunted and Mon from Date Night with the Ghost Gang. We were chatting about our content progress, and I mentioned the eye issues, and somehow the conversation drifted to lobotomies. And I had this sudden feeling and chilling thought. What if the pain I'd been feeling was connected to someone who'd undergone one? 30 minutes later, while still on the live, I saw a woman's face appear outside my study window. Just for a moment. In, out, gone. I mentioned it to Mon and Tim, and instantly we all wondered the same thing. Was she someone from Beechworth? Someone whose name had come through on the Spirit Talker? Someone trying to tell her story? Because here's the wildest part. The next day, my headache and eye pain were completely gone. After days of constant discomfort, the pain was gone. Had she come to be heard? Had she been trying to speak during the investigation and been blocked out? Or was something else blocking me from getting the episode out? I didn't know, but the timing was too perfect to ignore. And I wasn't the only one. Around the same time, Mon, Anthony and Sam all started experiencing headaches too. The same kind of vague, foggy, disorientating pressure that made it hard to think, hard to focus, and hard to create. They had what we called vague outs in their daily lives, especially when working on their content. This was something I'd experienced too, but I didn't know this until I started editing my first episode, and that's when I realised I'd actually had several vague outs during that recording. Moments where my mind just blanked, where I lost my place, where something felt off. We all felt it, we all experienced it, and none of it felt random. Then came the tech issues. Mon and Anthony finally released their episode, and YouTube immediately limited their reach. It limited their visibility, it limited their ability to promote it for weeks. Mon fought hard to figure out why, but nothing made sense. We all thought the same thing. Something is blocking this. Sam had her own issues, technical faults with her podcast equipment, trouble reviewing her audio, and strange glitches that just made no sense. The more time passed, the more we felt it. This heaviness. It was like a resistance, a sense of being held back. But then something shifted. Within a week or so after everyone released their content, the physical symptoms stopped. The headaches eased, the vague outs disappeared, and the synchronicities quietened. It was like whatever had been pressing against us to finally let go. Maybe the spirits realised that despite their resistance, their stories were being told. Maybe the ones who wanted to be heard outweighed the ones who wanted to silence us. Maybe the oppression that lingered over Beechworth loosened its grip, even just a little. But we'll never know for sure. What we do know is this. These experiences weren't isolated. They weren't imagined. They weren't coincidences. We all felt them. We all lived them. And as the puzzle pieces fell into place through research, through evidence, through intuition, the stories of Beechworth began to come alive in ways that none of us expected. And that's when we actually realised that the investigation doesn't just end when you leave the asylum. It followed us, it shaped us, and it connected us. It changed the way we will tell stories forever. This brings us to the end of our Beechworth series. 3 episodes became so much more than a paranormal investigation. In episode 1, we stepped into the asylum with open minds, open hearts, ready to listen to the stories that had been waiting in the dark for too long. In episode 2, we followed the threads, the voices, the shadows, the synchronicities, and uncovered layers of history, trauma, and truth that refused to stay silent. And in this final episode, we explored the aftermath, the grounding, the drive home, the weeks and months that followed, the physical symptoms, the strange delays, the shared experiences, and the undeniable sense that Beechworth wasn't finished with us when we walked out those doors. This trilogy wasn't just about evidence, it was about spirits. It wasn't even just about the asylum. It was actually about connection between the living, between the dead, between the stories we tell and the stories that find us. Beechworth changed us, each of us, in ways that we're still piecing together. And while this chapter closes here, the journey doesn't end, because what happened at Beechworth opened a door, a deeper one, a more personal one, a doorway into the unseen that doesn't just exist around us, but within us. And that's where we're heading to next. In our next trilogy, we step into something far more personal, the shadow sense. A 3-part series where we explore the experiences that don't fit neatly into paranormal or mental health, but sit in the uncomfortable space between them. Are they one and the same, but looked at from different ends of a scale? Or are they completely separate and not connected at all? Across these 3 episodes, we'll break down the moments where our bodies reacted before our minds understood, the emotional and physical symptoms that mirrored the energy around us, the experiences that looked psychological but felt something more, the crossover between lived trauma, intuition, and unexplained phenomena, the stories we've never shared publicly until now. Each episode dives into a different layer of the shadow sense, the collision point, where the paranormal and mental health overlap so closely that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. This trilogy isn't about diagnosing, it isn't about explaining, it isn't about choosing a side. This is about exploring that grey space, the place where the unseen world and the inner world mirror each other. The shadow sense will show us what happens when the past lives inside you. So, thank you again for joining me in the post-investigation episode. Once again, there have been, since putting the episode together, there has still been some interesting little experiences, like when I sort of started off this episode with obviously wanting to try and record and then something got in the way. And these are just tiny little snippets of lots of different little things that kind of happened over the hours, days, weeks and months since this investigation. And it's something that I think will stay with all of us. I think there is, and there'll always be connections back to Beechworth. I think I think once we've been there now, and with what we experienced, I think they'll always be there, and there'll probably always be a calling to go back. Fairly interesting, I can't even describe it really. It's just phenomenal. But, moving into the next bunch of episodes, this is a topic that I have been thinking about for a very, very long time, just in my own personal kind of thoughts and processes around the paranormal and mental health. Being that I obviously work in mental health now, but a lot of these thoughts came up when I was working in community services, and I was working with quite vulnerable people. And, this was a thought that always came up for me about, mental health and the paranormal, and are they one and the same? Are they two different things? What are they, So this is something that I've really wanted to do a really big deep dive into and kind of explore a bit more of. And I think it's perfectly fitting to have put this topic after the Beechworth investigation, because I think there's a lot that can be learned from, how mental health was dealt with in the past, where it's at now, and even the societal norms and expectations of things. I know we spoke about it. I think it might have been in the Tools of the Trade episodes, where it was sort of like, there's a theoretical side of things in the, non-paranormal realm that will give labels and diagnoses, and then there's the paranormal. And are they one and the same? Are they crossing over? Are they something completely different? Are we even on track to being able to understand the connections between them? So this is an area that I'm really looking forward to exploring, and obviously sharing with you and getting people's thoughts on it as well, because I'm sure there's probably a lot of people that have had that thought process as well with, is there a big gap between mental health and the paranormal? Is it a fine line? Is it one and the same? Is society's perception of mental health just a misunderstanding of paranormal and psychic experiences? So, without further ado, this is where I leave the post-investigation, and I am really excited to catch you all next time for the Shadow Sense trilogy, where we explore between mental health and the paranormal realms. So, once again, thanks for joining me, and always stay curious, stay grounded, and always expect the unexpected. Thanks again for your support. Again, please check out Date Night with the Ghost Gang on YouTube. They're obviously on their social medias as well, but definitely check out the episodes on their YouTube channel. And of course, with Sam as well, check out Aussie Afterlife podcast. Again, on all socials, and the podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So thank you all again. It's been a really big journey, and I look forward to continuing on with the next part of this podcasting journey, which is the shadow sense. I will see you next time. Bye.